in the next few days, we're going to be speaking about inequalities. And with these inequalities, we'll be writing our answers in interval notation. Based off of the examples given, we're going to fill in the appropriate words describing x corresponding to parts above. In part A, that represents all numbers that are greater than 8. In part B, it's representing all numbers that are less than or equal to 8. In part C, numbers greater than or equal to 0 and less than 8. In part D, numbers less than 0 or greater than or equal to 8. Using interval notation, these following correspond to the examples above. This interval notation corresponds to x is greater than 8. This corresponds to x is less than or equal to 8. This corresponds to x is greater than or equal to 0 but less than 8. This one corresponds to x is less than 0 or x is greater than or equal to 8. An interval begins with starting boundary. For example, in part A, 8 is your starting boundary and stops with an ending boundary. In part A, infinity is your ending boundary. They represent a set of numbers. In college algebra, we will be using interval notation to represent our inequality solutions. You use a parenthesis when it does not include the number. Negative and positive infinity are always used with parentheses. You use a bracket when the number is included in the inequality. For example, greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. Quick note, remember, U stands for union. We use this with the or statement. We're going to rewrite the following inequalities in interval notation. This is representing all numbers that are greater than or equal to -2. The starting boundary is -2. The ending boundary is infinity. We use a bracket because we have greater than or equal to. In number 2, it's at all numbers that are less than 5. Our starting boundary is -infinity. Our ending boundary is 5, and we use a parenthesis because there's no equal sign. In number 3, this is numbers that are greater than -10 but less than 2 or equal to 2. Our starting boundary is -10. Our ending boundary is 2. We use a parenthesis with -10 because there's no equal sign, and we use a bracket with 2 because there is an equal sign. The last one is representing all numbers that are less than -5, which would mean that it starts at -infinity and it goes to -5 with a parenthesis, or use union sign. It starts at 4 and it goes all the way to infinity. We use a bracket on 4 because of the equal sign. The following are pictures shown. Use the inequality graphs to write the inequality in interval notation. This graph represents all numbers that are less than or equal to -2. In interval notation, we use -infinity to -2, and our stopping point is at -2, including it. This picture is representing all numbers that are just greater than 2. In interval notation, we start with 2, end with infinity, and we use a parenthesis because of the open circle, which means it does not include 2. By the way, notice the closed circle in number 5. In number 7, okay, what I want you to do is write number 7 in interval notation, and then on the very last page there are a set of answers. There should be an answer for number 7 so you can check it. Go ahead and do the same thing with number 8. Again, the answers are on the back. That concludes interval notation. Next, we'll see single linear inequality.